at 227.2 pounds. He holds a near-perfect professional record of 10 victories, opposite just 1 defeat, with 7 of those wins coming by way of knockout.
It's just wild to see after how that first round went.
Nice left hook
there. The right hand. Do not slip to your left on the jab.
It's just a matter of time. He's getting broke down.
Whoa.
That's a good hook he landed on. Oh!
Overhand right.
A minute 15 seconds away from the midpoint of this fight, and now Davis trying to walk.
The 2025 battle between Jake Paul and Gervonta Davis was an absolute riot in the ring. The undefeated knockout champion faced up against with the villain on YouTube, and what transpired was vicious, startling, and unforgettable. Did Tank Davis expose Jake Paul in the most brutal manner imaginable, or did he just accomplish the impossible? Gervonta Davis versus Jake Paul. It appeared to be the kind of altercation that ought never to have taken place. A lightweight champion who established his reputation at 135 pounds will face a cruiserweight who weighs more than 200 pounds. Regulators in Atlanta halted the initial fight contract due to the size discrepancy alone. Although they weren't prepared to take the chance, boxing has never been a rational sport. It is powered by spectacles. Because Miami thrives on turmoil and entertainment, the battle was rescheduled to the city's Casa Center. It wasn't merely a boxing contest that we witnessed. The largest mismatch in modern history became a worldwide phenomenon. Netflix seized the chance and presented the battle as if it were the Super Bowl of combat sports. And it was successful. In addition to watching punches being thrown, millions of people worldwide watch to see what happens when a YouTuber who has transformed into a bruiser runs into one of boxing's most feared knockout artists. Belts weren't the point. It has nothing to do with rankings. It had to do with history. The weight disparity wasn't merely a plot point, though. There was a storm. Tank Davis was dwarfed by the frame of the troublesome kid, Jake Paul. Longer reach, heavier, and taller. It was David versus Goliath on paper. Here's the twist, though. Goliath wasn't the innate warrior in this tale. The boxing establishment never appreciated Jake Paul because he was the outsider, the disruptor, and the wild card who established his reputation. The David with dynamite in his fists was Gervonta Davis. In 3 divisions, they are unbeaten, feared, and have 24 victories, 23 by knockout. The conflict was more about what occurs when hype and skill collided than it was about fair play. However, this altercation wasn't unexpected. The trash talk was fuel for the fire, and the seeds had been sown years earlier. Go back 4 years to when Jake Paul made a move that most people found funny, calling out Canelo Alvarez. Gervonta Davis got in at that point and made the well-known claim that he would beat Jake Paul's brakes. Even though it was only a brief social media attack, Jake, being Jake, didn't take it well. He exploited his enormous online following to turn the insult into advertising after making fun of Davis's height and using him as a punchline. And it snowballed from there. Paul was dismissed by Tank as not being a true boxer. Paul leaned into the same line that detractors had been using since the beginning. He used every slight and rejection as fuel. His supporters yelled, yes, more loudly the more the boxing community told him no. Additionally, boxers like Davis were under increasing pressure to actually enter the ring and silence him as his followers' yelling increased. After Jake Paul astonished everyone by defeating Mike Tyson, the rivalry reached a new level. It was intriguing because of the two men's differences. Jake Paul is a brazen, boisterous man who constantly sells a fight like it's the next big Hollywood movie. Quiet, but icy. Tank Davis lets his fists speak for him. Tank wasn't kidding when he claimed to have put Paul to sleep. It was a pledge supported by his history of extinguishing lights nearly each time he entered the ring. The conflict was therefore unavoidable. There was more than just a bout between two boxers. Two universes were merging. The most popular boxing disruptor, Jake Paul, is putting himself to the test against a pound-for-pound star who has nothing to prove but everything to lose if he allows the YouTuber to defeat him. A pressure cooker was produced by the Tyson fight, the weight disparity, and the trash language. The globe wasn't only observing when fight night arrived. They were holding their breath. And that's how an uncalled-for brawl came to pass. Jake Paul's ascent to fame in boxing has been nothing short of spectacular. We are discussing a man who began his career as a YouTube prankster, creating outrageous videos to get views, and who eventually found himself in the ring beside Mike Tyson, one of the most ominous figures in combat sports history. And truly winning, not just getting there. At that time, was Tyson 58 years old? Indeed. Was he the same Iron Mike who used to force heavyweights to retire early? Not at all. Nevertheless, Jake Paul received the golden ticket after defeating Tyson, even a late career version of him. What ought to have been a gimmick was transformed by him into what he referred to as the defining win of my career. Naturally, critics didn't believe it. The Tyson bout was referred to as a heist. According to them, Tyson appeared worn out and elderly, and he had no business competing against a strong man in his 20s like Jake. Eddie Hearn blatantly insulted the entire situation. Here's the problem, though. People couldn't stop talking about it, regardless of how you felt about it. Additionally, Jake Paul was an expert at spinning it. For him, Tyson's age had nothing to do with that victory. It was about rewriting his place in boxing history, beating a great, and stealing headlines. And there was chaos as a result. Colby Covington made a strong statement, claiming that Jake didn't look like a true boxer and instead appeared wimpy. Jake's entire strategy was ridiculed by Clarissa Shields, one of the most accomplished fighters living, who described it as little more than chaos and hustling. Francis Ngannou, the MMA heavyweight monster, made jokes about smacking Jake to make him look weaker. Additionally, Jake was essentially instructed by retired great Andre Ward, if you want to prove yourself, fight a real contender. Everybody had a viewpoint. Everybody had an opinion. However, this is when Jake changed the course of events. Criticism didn't break him. Instead, it gave him more energy. Every remark said by a boxer became a headline. Each tweet turned into a soundbite for his upcoming advertisement. All of a sudden, Jake Paul was more than just a boxing YouTuber. Real champions were compelled to recognize his name. Whether you like him or not, the man started discussions that the sport hadn't had in a long time. There was a man on the other side of the ring who had established his name without the use of clickbait, marketing gimmicks, or trash talk. Tank Davis Gervonta. Tank was the quiet before the storm, whereas Jake was all noise and mayhem. The man who spoke with his fists. Tank's record was impeccable prior to replacing Paul. 23 knockouts, 24 victories, and 0 losses. That is devastation, not simply domination. Almost all of the men who entered the ring with him were either broken or rendered unconscious. He fought to end evenings early rather than to win rounds. The foundation of Tank's story was grit. Raised in a harsh environment and born in Baltimore, boxing was more than simply a sport. It was a means of survival. He brought that unadulterated hunger into the ring when he turned pro. However, his adoption as Atlanta's son further distinguished him. Tank became a cult hero in the sport as the city welcomed him like their own, and he provided them highlight after highlight and knockout after knockout. It wasn't simply his record either. He won that way. He wasn't a puncher of volume. He wasn't the type to constantly jab at opponents. Tank was the one who waited, made calculations, and then exploded. It was lights out after a single clean shot. It's alarming to have that much power at 135 pounds. In addition to respecting him, fans were afraid of the person on the other side of the ring. Because of this, the majority of boxers thought Jake Paul was finally falling into a trap from which he would be unable to escape before this bout. Yes, Jake had defeated Tyson, as well as Woodley, Anderson Silva, and Nate Diaz. Tank, however, was neither a retired legend nor an elderly MMA star. Tank was at the height of his abilities, undefeated, merciless, and had a knockout percentage above 95%. Those figures are honest. And for that reason, a lot of people thought Paul's campaign was going to end badly. Once Tank's fists hit their target, he was meant to be saved by no Netflix production, no YouTube influence, and no significant weight advantage. He was supposed to be humbled by this battle. The bout served as a reminder to the world that boxing is still a sport based on ability, timing, and unadulterated talent rather than promotional hype. There was no greater contrast between the two men. With millions of fans, Jake Paul is a noisy disruptor who sells fights like a Hollywood movie. The silent killer Gervonta Davis has a following based on terror and reverence. One individual is known for destruction, the other for advancement. You don't simply get a battle when you put that combination in the same ring. You get a storm that the whole sports world can't ignore. This clash was significant because of this. It was more than just skill versus hype. Size and speed weren't the only factors at play. Everything that boxing enthusiasts quarrel over was combined into a single battle. Tradition versus upheaval, legacy versus influence, and respect versus mayhem. Nobody gave a damn about the fairness of the weight disparity by the time fight night arrived. Whether Jake was genuine or not didn't matter to anyone. This was all that mattered. Would Jake Paul be able to withstand Tank Davis's blows? Or was Tank going to do to almost everyone what he had done to them all before? Turn out the lights in a ruthless manner.